So my name is Katherine Burke. I work at Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, developing medical humanities programming and curriculum. And I am also the current president of an organization called Pedagogy and Theatre of the Oppressed. Anybody who's been in education familiar with Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed? Theatre of the Oppressed is related to Pedagogy of the Oppressed. It was created by a man named Augusto Boal, who was a Brazilian, who was a theater director and a theorist and a writer and a politician and an activist. And he said, and I believe firmly, that we can use theater to create our future rather than just wait for our future. And that's kind of like what we're all sitting in here doing today, is trying to figure this out so that we don't have to improvise something to do when the disaster hits. But I wanted to tell you about my involvement in Pedagogy and Theatre of the Oppressed for another reason, that I have a story. Last year was our 20th annual conference. We're an international organization, and we were fortunate enough to finally be able to bring some guests to the conference through a donation from Liberia. And this was, so some guests from Liberia. This was in the summer. And we got them there, and it was very exciting. It was 3 people, a husband and wife, and a friend of theirs. And they came because they're doing this Theatre of the Oppressed work in Liberia, and they want to make social change through theater in Liberia. The wife in the couple is they're both kind of in their mid-30s, and the wife is a physician. This was last summer. They went back to Liberia, to Monrovia, and Ebola started. And they lived in the heart of Monrovia. And the husband, who's a friend of mine, started messaging me on Facebook saying, just want to keep you all posted, what's happening here. Our neighbors next door, there's a family of 13, they all died last week. My wife, they have 5 children under the age of 10, 3 of them are adopted. My wife has decided not to go into work because she doesn't want to bring Ebola home to our 5 children. We don't know what to do. We can't leave the country because our bank accounts have been frozen because she's a physician and they want to keep all the physicians here. They didn't know what to do. So we didn't know what to do. These are our friends. And so we panicked and we thought, well, we're all a bunch of theater artists and activists. We have no money. So so we started we sent an email out to our membership, our small membership, and we raised about $2,000, and we sent them, we wired them the $2,000. It was very complicated. And they said, and they weren't asking for money. They didn't want, but they gladly took it. And then they took the money, and we thought that they were just they wanted to get to Ghana. But they took the money, and they helped a whole caravan of people get out of Liberia into Ghana. And then we thought, oh my God, what have we done? What if we have sent Ebola into Ghana? Which was entirely possible that we would have done this. So, coming from, fortunately, as far as I know, we didn't. And the family got to Ghana and kind of rode it out there, and now they're back in Liberia. Thank goodness. But I can't imagine being in the position of that family and that mother saying, here I have 5 children under the age of 10, and I'm being asked to do this, and I know that she wanted to. I just can't imagine, I can't fathom being in that position. And I know that probably very few people in this room have been in a position that is as intense as that, but obviously there are people in this room who have been in those kinds of positions as well. So I'm going to ask us to do something a little bit different now. And we're going to play a couple of games together, and you're going to just have to go with me, and you're going to have to trust me that medical professionals around the world are doing this. You can Google Theatre of the Oppressed and Medical Humanities, especially in India, where some colleagues of mine are doing this work with lots and lots of medical professionals. So I'm going to ask us to start with a very simple exercise. You may stand or you may sit with this. I like to stand, so I invite you to do that. And to take one hand and draw a big circle in the air. Very good. Wonderful. You could also do this with a foot if you wanted to, if you're sitting. Now shake that off. Take the other hand and draw a big cross in the air. And you know what's coming, right? Now do both of those things at the same time. Is there anybody in the room who can do it? There's anyone you can do it. Great. So if you can do it now, if you can do it, shake your foot and draw a circle on the floor, and then try to sign your name in the air. You can do this sitting if you want to. It's entirely possible. Okay. Now we're going to play one other game. We're just going to do a very easy handshake game. So I'm going to shake some of these hands below. You cannot let go of that person's hand until you have somebody else's hand. And you can let go of that person's hand. So just take a few seconds and play this.
Now we don't have anybody.
You have to shake somebody else's.
Oh, I want one.
You two have to shake that.
All right, very good. Okay. All right. Yeah. Very good. We're going to play a little game here. That's called. You're going to have to get into groups of 3, and this is a game that's entitled "Complete the Image." May I have 2 people just come on up here with me? This is very easy to do. 1, 2. Thank you very much. Great. I'm Catherine. I'm Kate. Hi, Kate. It's nice to meet you. And Cheryl. Cheryl. It's very nice to meet you. All right. So we're going to play this game, "Complete the Image." It'll take just a short time. First, we're going to do this with no theme. What we're going to try to do is get used to having a conversation that's a physical conversation, right? As opposed to a verbal conversation right now. Imagery is very powerful, and as you know, the body can affect the emotions, the mind, and the thoughts very, very easily. You know, there's a TED Talk about this. You know that if you put a pencil between your teeth like this, and you start to feel happy if you do that for 2 minutes, like that. Also, handy to know if you're going to go for a job interview, if you're going to take an examination, that if you stand in a superhero pose for 2 minutes, it's true that your test scores will actually improve. That you'll do a better job, right? So go stand in the bathroom and do this. Okay, so we're going to play a very simple game. So you and I are going to shake hands, and we're going to freeze in a statue, and you're going to tap one of us out. So, great, now you're going to step out. And you're going to create a different image. So, ooh, lovely. Excellent. Now you're going to tap one of us out, either one. Great, keep your position. And I'll tap one of you out. Right? Do anything you want, right? Just play this game for say 2 minutes, and then I'll stop you, okay? So grab a group of 3. You can do it sitting. You can do it standing. I like standing. Find a little space and play. And there's lots of space up here too, so come on up here too. Okay. Okay, so I space up here.
Okay, and then I do something different, right? Then you're going to tap step us on. Okay, so let's just go. Now I have to do something different.
next part as non-verbally as possible. You're going to play the same game, but I want you to try this game with a theme in mind. And that theme is going to be the theme that we're working with. Risk, contagion, duty to care, right? So you can, create images that are inspired by those things. It can be inspired by an actual event. It can be just inspired by your imagination. You can create an image, or you can take a pose that seems risky. You can take a pose that seems contagious. I don't know. So try that. We'll try that for just a few minutes, all right? And after that, we'll have a little bit of a dialogue. Ready? Same game, but with a theme. Go.
Risk.
So we're supposed to start taking over.
You make contact, or you just swipe a post?
It doesn't matter. You can make contact or not make contact. Thank you.
You've got me here, and I am.
I'm going to count you down now. I'm going to ask you to play. Hold on for just a second.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to play this game for about 20 or 30 more seconds and making these images, and do your best to make them as extreme as you can. I'm going to count down then from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. When I hit 0, all three of you should be in an image. You don't have to be touching each other, by the way. Just to let you know. I'm so sorry. Sorry, I didn't make that clear. But all three of you can be in an image, and then I'm going to ask you to freeze and to maintain your silence because I'm going to give you one more instruction as you're in that image, okay? So play this game for about 20, 30 more seconds.
Right. You're a bold team.
That's probably it.
I got again, and now
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, freeze. Now you're all in an image. Think of a line, a word, a phrase that is inspired by the pose that you're in. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, 0, and when I say go, you're going to all say that phrase or word at the same time, whatever's in your mind. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm out. Stop script.
All right. Have a seat for a second. And if you can sit with your, that's best. Sit with the people you just worked with for a second.
Go ahead, it's your first.
Okay, so it's fun and it's a silly kind of a way to start a dialogue. But I'd like for everybody to be able to have a conversation with the group of people that they just were playing with about that physical imagery and about what that might have caused you to think, right? So some questions. I mean, knowing that the body influences the mind and the emotions and vice versa, did any of those images come from your own experiences, or did they remind you of your own experiences, or did any of the images that you had strike you in a surprising way? And then once you've talked about that, we're going to talk in small groups like this for about 10 minutes or so, and I have some guiding questions that might help you to start a discussion about these about this issue. So some of them inspired by this kind of physical dialogue that you just had. What is risk? What is your experience regarding duty to care and or risk? And did you have an experience with this? And what path did you choose to take and why? How did others react to your decisions? Do you wish you'd done something different? And what would you tell somebody facing a similar situation? So just some things to get you started in a little small group discussion. Either just with has three or so we're going to break apart a story here with one person as the protagonist. If we don't have anybody else as a protagonist, I'm going to pick on you and make you a protagonist here for us. We're all obviously the protagonists of our own stories, right, in our own lives. So I wonder if anybody has a story that they would be willing to share about duty to care, about a time that they had to make a decision. Would you be willing to share? Sure. Why don't I give you the microphone? What's your name?
Sally.
Sally. Thank you.
It's very similar. It's the TMI thing. And I was a nurse in the NICU, and we sent all our babies, except for 5, away to referring hospitals. And the 5 that were left here on ventilators, we were each assigned. I don't know how we got assigned. I think just those who stood up. Maybe the people who used to transport babies anyway. And we were each assigned to take a baby. Mine was to go to Philly, take one of the ventilated preemies. And it was like a ghost town kind of here. I remember just standing on it was when the NICU was in the West Wing on the 7th floor, and we used to stand outside the unit looking out the window to the west to see if we could, see the towers explode or something. I'm not sure. But it was interesting. We didn't have much to do because I remember there being a lot of staff here and only a few patients. I'm not sure. So we did a lot of sitting around. I remember a few residents left sort of unexcused. People were kind of chatting about that off and on, but I don't think there were any repercussions about that. And I remember calling my sister or my brother, my old boyfriend in California. And, when we went off duty, I remember drinking beer and calling him and telling him we were going to die. But I don't, we sort of said goodbye. So in my youth, I think I was 24, I don't remember being afraid. I don't ever remember thinking of leaving. It was almost eerily, I hate to say this, eerily a party atmosphere for people who stayed. With not much to do but think about this and talk about it and wonder what was happening. And our group was sitting here trying to figure out what would it have been like today with networking, social networking and cell phones. And I did get through to California, so I don't know how that happened, but my friend did not appreciate the phone call. But I remember in our apartment there was a lot of us nurses just sitting around talking, staying together, kind of just being there in the experience. That's about all I remember.
Thanks. Thank you. Does anyone else have a story that they'd like to share?
Just briefly, I have to comment about being here and when the call went out that something had happened. And I do remember, Joe, you weren't there. I worked in hematology at that time, but I do recall you were not in the room when this happened. But the party atmosphere, I'm glad you commented about that, because there were some residents, there were a couple fellows and 2 nurses, and Dr. Graham Jeffries was our chief at that time, and he came down the hallway and said, all doctors and nurses stay in place. And he could be pretty imposing, and so we stayed in place. But we were all in the conference room, and there was all the ingredients for madness in that room. one of the fellows says, "It's time we all act out our sexual fantasies." The other nurse and I go, and then we were in hematology, and we said, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Our problems are going to be 15, 20 years from now. What are we going to do? And we said, okay, there's going to be car accidents. It's all going to be orthopedics because there's going to be people on the road, running into each other. So we were imagining some of the wildest things. But a quick story I shared with my team here was, I'm from St. Louis, and in the midst of the HIV, I was working in hematology with Dr. Ballard, and had been splashed and stuff and all that sort of thing. But anyway, I was in the midst of this, knew everything about it, but I was visiting my family in St. Louis. It was my brother, my dad in the car. It was winter, it was icy, and it was snowing. We were going over a bridge, and this elderly lady had a car accident, and she was bleeding, really bleeding from her head. And I didn't even think about it. I just applied pressure and started talking to her, and then my brother was calling for EMTs. But I didn't think about it. And I've been in the process of learning to use gloves, which that transition was very, very difficult for me. But I didn't think about it. I didn't think once about it. I was holding pressure and trying to keep her alert and keep her conscious, and I didn't think about it. The person who thought about it was my brother. When it's all over, he says, "Go wash your hands. You know that AIDS thing." That's my story. Thank you.
Anybody else have one more? Does anybody else have a story about a difficult decision? Yes.
I too lived through the TMI situation, and I recall different things about it. Well, the one thing is, I think that at the time we looked towards our physician colleagues for cues about how to behave, about what the real threat was, and it occurs to me that perceived threat can be very different in different situations. I never felt that with the HIV situation, but with the TMI it was very different. And I remember thinking, okay, well, there were a lot of things happening that were very unusual, such as post-op patients were being discharged, day one post-op, who would have been here for 4 or 5 days easily. And I remember attending physicians going in the room and giving a patient a glass of water and saying, can you take a few sips of this? And if they did so successfully, they were going home after abdominal surgery the day before. And that never happened. So we were seeing those kinds of behavioral cues as well that were telling all of us that this is very serious, and no matter what facts we have right now, this is a real threat. And so there was the threat of, do I stay at work? Do I leave? I was getting married. I was getting married May 5th, and so to me it was like, wow, this was never meant to be. This marriage is not going to happen. The world's coming to an end. And so my parents lived up on Route 81, about 65 miles from here, and I was able to go home on Friday evening. As the story unfolded on Saturday, they were talking about meltdowns more seriously, and I did call off. I called to the nursing coordinator, who was in tears at the time, and she said, I understand, it's okay. And this poor woman was here trying to keep things together. Now, granted, there were a lot of patients had been discharged, but when I came back to work on Monday morning, we had coded, all the patients were color-coded based on how they would travel, and we had 24-hour bags of supplies for them. And at that point, the threat in my mind had changed somewhat, I think, because we realized at that time that if this was serious, it didn't matter where you lived on the East Coast, you couldn't be in a safe place. So at that point, I told my family, look, just go where you can go, and I'm going to be heading to Philadelphia in some sort of vehicle with a patient. So maybe we'll meet up, but so the threat changed over the course of that week, I believe. And I don't know what I would do today. I think I might hang around and just figure out, what will be, will be. I don't know.
Thanks.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Zerlo from Infectious Diseases, and I'm a senior member of the Infectious Diseases Division, 25 years here, and when the Ebola thing came up, as we prepared to become treatment center, which is what we are, the call came out. We need volunteers. And I'm sure there are many others in the room who answered that call, felt kind of an obligation. And I didn't hesitate to do it in comparison with our younger faculty member, for example, who had young children. My youngest is 17. I really don't have young children anymore. And that kind of was a factor in it. And with all that said, I remain rather ambivalent about having to deal with this. But, I guess there's a bit of maturity in the whole thing and a bit of, having some perspective, looking back at where I was, where I am, and just feeling the necessity to take on that responsibility. Now, with all that said, I both hope and pray we don't get an Ebola case here and I don't have to ever get challenged. So I'm sure I'm not the first and only to have thought about that in this room.
Great. I was hoping to get some ambivalence in here because would you be willing for us to come up and see your story a little bit for this next part?
Sure.
Okay, come on up. He says with ambivalence. Great. All right, so hang on. All right, so we all know that in theater, anybody who's taken an acting class has probably talked about objectives. What's your objective? What's your dominant will? What's the dominant force? So for you in that story, your driving force was that you felt an obligation to a duty to care. You felt
My responsibility,
your
correct.
responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But there were also other things underneath that as well, right? So we have essentially we have a dramatic situation here. We have an antagonist, which is Ebola, right? The crisis, right? And we also have several other characters at play within yourself. There's in the way that a prism breaks white light into a rainbow, there's a rainbow of forces at play within each of us as we're making these kinds of decisions. And so if you could think for just a second about the colors that were at play, the forces at play within you as you were making this decision and that ambivalence, and give them different characters, So one of them is, as you said, your responsibility. You could strike a pose as being a responsible person, right?
Sure.
Okay, so show us what responsibility looks like to you. Now, does anybody here in this room identify with this character, with responsibility? Who identifies with that? Right? Would somebody come up here and be responsibility for us? Anybody who identifies with that? It's not hard. You just kind of have to say it. Great. Thank you. Great. What would you say would be another character at play? So you can just come and just be up here for just a moment. Another character at play.
Well, here I am in this field of infectious diseases. By its nature, I am, I could put myself on the line in a lot of circumstances. Ebola is not the first, nor will it be the last emerging infection that we will confront. I was at the forefront also of HIV and AIDS. And so in that regard, for example, I have conspicuously not volunteered to go to Africa, where the lion's share of the epidemic is going on. I'm an expert in the field. I have a lot that I could do, but I never did. I was always a bit afraid to expose myself, so perhaps the next color would be yellow?
So a little fear? Fear. Does anybody identify with this? Yes? Could somebody come up here who identifies with this and be fear for us? Only if you... So nobody's been this.
So everybody can, because everybody's afraid to come up.
Great, thank you very much. Do you think there's another color in there? I know that you had talked about your children.
So to my sense of responsibility to my family.
Okay.
It won't do my children any good at all, older now though they are, to be without a father. And, that certainly has occurred to me. And so I clearly feel a responsibility to my family. Sometimes I feel like it's easy to hide behind that, though, and say, after all, chosen this job to be a physician. I get compensated very highly for that privilege in this country, and I feel a sense of responsibility to do what I need to do as a physician. And that really should be my primary motivation, but it's not always. So what color would responsibility to family be? Sort of almost like I'm hiding behind them to perhaps avoid my real responsibility.
Okay. Does anybody identify with that? I saw him do this. Does anybody identify with that feeling of responsibility to family versus responsibility versus duty to care? And would anybody care to come up and be this character for us? Only if you identify with that, please.
I would have when my kids were younger. They're 30 and 33 now, so not so much.
It's been part of the conversation that I've heard a couple of times in
John.
this room. Okay, great. So now we have 3 characters here. Did anybody hear anything else in his story that they thought was a character in there that he might not be quite aware of? Sometimes somebody hears something in our stories, and you can say, yes, that's true, or no, that's not true. Yes?
So knowing John, I know he's a very compassionate person. So I think within all the ambivalence, there got to be that sense of being passionate about helping those who are at risk.
So there's compassion in there. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I feel compassion. I've always felt a struggle, though, in my whole life about what altruism really is. Is there such a thing as really, truly, true altruism, that you do something utterly for someone else or some other good, rather than in any way being your own? I've struggled with that. I would imagine we've all struggled with that. I certainly have struggled with that, and that's kind of, I feel compassion, but.
Would you come up and be compassion for us? Come on, you saw it.
That sounds like in order.
Well, no. Okay. All right, so we have 4 characters. We're going to need one more character, and that's going to be the character of the crisis of Ebola, who's just going to have to, be the antagonist. Does anybody feel like you could be a strong antagonist here? Somebody who's mouthy or something? I don't know. Not mouthy. Somebody who can put up a good argument, I'll say.
They're pushing me.
All right. So can I have? So I'd like you to stay here, and let's have our colors go back here. Now, little game here that we're going to play. Actually, let me bring you over here for just a second. Now, John,
Please.
correct. Dad's name. I should know this. Okay, John. You guys can relax for just a second. When he comes up to you, strike your pose, and you can say, I'm like this because, or I wish I weren't like this because, or I wish I were more of this, or something like that. Just have a little, describe each of these characters as you come up to them. Okay, so let's start down at this end. Come on over here with me. Could you strike your pose? This is responsibility, right? So
this is the way I should be. I'm a responsible adult. I've reached a certain point in my life that I'm supposed to be on top. I'm going to be a leader. I'm going to show people how one should act and how one should do what things, how one should do things.
great, thank you. Next.
This is the fearful side of me, and this is pretty deep inside me. I'm, needless to say, I fear a lot of things. It's kind of my nature. So fear is, kind of always over one shoulder.
So colors, you're getting a little bit of information about who you are here. So, okay, next one.
This is my convenient excuse, my family. I love them dearly, love my wife, love my children. I'm a big time, close-knit, large extended Italian family. This is my convenient block. I can say, well, hey, I got to be there for my family. I can't take risk. And this is my compassionate side. I hope this wins out, that I'm really trying to do things for the good of mankind, not just for my own personal sort of self-aggrandizement. I'm hoping to be this person.
Great. Okay, thank you. So come on over here again, John. And we have Nancy. Nancy, come on up here. Now, you are the crisis. You're a Boal. You're the crisis. Okay, let's take a step right over here now. Now, your job in this is to be the argument against each of these people. Now, John, you're going to be able to send in one at a time, in whatever order you want. You're going to send in each of these colors, right, to talk to the crisis. And they're each going to put up their argument for, who they are. So your responsibility, your fear, your convenient family. I think you're being hard on yourself there. And your compassion, right? And you're going to argue back against them, right? So it's just going to be a little improvisational theater game. There's no way that you can do it wrong. So send whoever in you want to at this point and say, and each of you can say whatever you want to the crisis as your character.
Let's send in fear first.
I'm afraid to go.
So go ahead. Excellent.
I'm supposed to argue against the fear.
Well, you're supposed to, what is it that you as the crisis want, right? You want somebody to respond to you, I think. Yeah.
Everybody responds.
Yeah.
But it's always there. We can protect ourselves. Well, I don't know. I that sounds good, and I know intellectually that sounds good. But look at those body bags. Do you see them? Do you see them? You see them? Count them. We can get more.
Yeah.
And as long as you protect yourself, you're good.
Oh, wait, I want responsibility in here. Would you please help?
Fear, come on out.
Get going. I'm responsible enough that I can take you on.
There's a lot of other people that can be responsible too. Can you bring your friends with you?
Some. Maybe not all of them.
But you don't have to.
But there's enough of us responsible ones that we can handle it.
You can send the younger people.
They aren't really as responsible as us older people because we do have experience on our side. We have knowledge on our side, and we can fight against you.
Is there a big budget there?
There's always a risk.
Compassion. Go in there and bolster her case.
I came into the medical profession because I really care about my population, my patient, the world. I'm a role model for my students. I would tell them and show the world how we can take care of them, and you will be taken care of and be gone.
There's other people that can do this.
Oh, I know, but they'll be on our side. There are many, many compassionate people. Many of my friends, many of my colleagues really care about this problem. We will work together.
Isolate them and you wouldn't have to do it.
Oh, no, not my friends. Not my friends. They all came into this profession because we care about the world and our communities and our families, and together, if we work together, we will overcome.
Now I'm feeling just too brave about this. Family, would you go in and help me out here now?
I've had this conversation with my wife. And she reminds me that we have children and grandchildren now, and they need me more. And there are other people who are over there and they don't have our situation.
There's still other people that can go, but you're the specialist. You could really help.
You don't know my wife.
Not quite sure how to argue against that. Because I probably was wondering. So, I don't know what to argue, but.
Okay, great. Now, can you do me a favor? So thinking about a crisis and the distance from the crisis that each of these things was, place them how they were, and then place them how you think that you'd like them to be ideally. Or maybe they both match up. Maybe you did exactly what you wanted to do.
No, I guess I'd have to say I want compassion first.
Okay, so place compassion as far, or like there's your antagonist. How far from the antagonist do you want compassion to be?
I want compassion to be pretty close there.
Okay, so take a place close to.
And I want responsibility second. And let's put fear third. Fear will kind of stay in the background a bit, and I'll leave my family responsibilities to last. Maybe farthest from the place.
And can we see what you guys look like in the poses that he gave you? That's great. And is that how you would like it to be, or is that how it is? Or is it both?
I'd say both. So I want it to be, I guess if it were that way truly, I'd have spent the last 10 years of my life in sub-Saharan Africa. So I guess perhaps the order is a little different. Clearly I've been most fearful, hiding behind lots of things perhaps. But nonetheless, at least in some regards, I've taken responsibility and want to take responsibility. And I certainly feel compassion to what I do.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Do any of these colors talk to each other?
all the time.
Who talks? Who's talking to who? Would you like to see two of them and have a conversation?
Well, sure. I mean, I guess it's really, either fear and responsibility or fear and compassion. Perhaps the responsibility. Let's hear those two argue.
Can fear and responsibility have a little conversation about what you're going to do about your antagonist?
Well, I don't know what you're afraid of.
Well, sure, you could be bold and bright and do all this stuff, but do you know what can happen to you and what you can take home to your family?
I do, but I think my responsibility stands out, and as a responsible adult, I use my common sense and my knowledge and my education, and then I can overcome fear in a situation.
Well, you just tried.
I've been overcoming fear my whole life.
This is different. This is scarier than ever. This is the worst.
Great. Are there any other comments?
Sure, I want fear to hear from compassion and vice versa.
Okay, fear and compassion. Have a little conversation.
What does humanism stand for?
I'm sorry? What does humanism stand for?
What does humanism stand for? Let's hear this conversation first, and then we can delve into that.
You know, I went to medicine for compassion. We're there to fix the wrong, heal the suffering, and we are here to help. We gotta go take care of this problem.
Well, isn't that special?
I am special. All my patients have.
Oh, yeah. Well, fear is always there. Fear is always there because we're the red flag.
That's good. You're good, because you remind me the thing that I might have forgotten. But I will rationalize it and think about what the pitfalls might be, where the dangers might be, and I can systematically prepare for that so it won't happen. Because I can plan for it.
I'll always be there.
And you can come with. You will come with, but you will not be a barrier for the things that I'd like to do for this world, this community, and my patients. So you will be a good reminder, but I'm not going to let you stand in front of me to do the things I really care about.
Compassion is very convincing. But I'll always be there, right behind you.
All right, I will lose some sleep sometimes.
Great. Anything else, or do you feel?
No, I'm okay.
You're okay? Great. Let's thank all of our players. So I feel, this is one of the ways in which we use, in which I use theater to have a dialogue, to have a larger dialogue with communities. And I wonder if any of these colors that John put up here were things that resonated with you, and if there was anything that you wanted to talk about with the larger group regarding this issue. So I'm going to ask Dan to